Right. Is it not going? And then I was practicing with this morning, so let's see if it works. Hold on. Give me a minute. This is going to take a second to prepare it.
It's our first time trying to do both.
I know. I've been nervous about it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to stop it. I do have to do a title.
You both have
and it's
very
Adrianna
beautiful
with one N.
Oh, yes, I know. I noticed that today. Sorry. I should know that, right? And this is
Adrianna, what do you want as your sign if we're hearing like shh from your hair? Just a direct chat? Not yet. No, I just want to
direct chat. Yeah, I'll pay attention to it.
We're live.
I'm a big fan of shared agreements.
Okay, we're live on Facebook, and we're live now. So here we go. Hi, my name is Kelly Walsh, and thank you and welcome to Spiritual Shadowboxing. This is actually our 14th episode, which I cannot believe, the second one of 2021. And we're just so excited to share this dialogue, share the conversation of what is empowering and moving us forward in the next 2021. 2020, I don't want to go too much into it, was quite the year. And for all of us in the spiritual community and people that are making a change and trying to make a difference in this world, bring heaven to earth, as they say, it was a time for cocooning. Now it is a time for kind of branching out and becoming able to make change, make difference. So we're so excited about our guest today, they're on the pioneering aspect of law with plant medicine. So we're going to introduce them in a second. But what I want to do before we start is, as you know, I channel and I do channeled meditation. And this morning I went into a deep meditation, and I got a message from Lady Nada, who I don't really know Lady Nada very well. She doesn't really come to me very often. So I looked her up, and it said Lady Master Nada is the soul's advocate before the bar of divine justice. And I'm like, woo, okay, I'm listening. So she said, which is, I think we all know it, but it's nice to hear it. Plant medicine is the key to recalling, not reconnecting, but recalling our connection to Mother Earth, to ingest, to digest the most high of sacredness of all life. They have their own wisdom. They have their own intelligence, so divine in nature, sharing the consciousness of the Mother Goddess. She whispers to you within the deep recesses of your heart, and they ask, do you see now? And they ask, do you know now? So that's it.
So beautiful. Thanks, Kelly. And I'm Farishta. I'm a transformational coach doing healing work through shadow work and relational skills. And I am really honored to introduce you both. So Hadas Alterman, from JD University of California, Berkeley Law, BA, University of California, Santa Cruz. Hadas is an Israeli-American attorney born in Jerusalem and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. Hadas is a restorative justice practitioner, so awesome, and community organizer dedicated to using the law to expand equitable access to plant medicine. She's the policy director of the New York psilocybin legalization campaign, Democratize Healing, and board member of the Psychedelic Bar Association. Welcome, Hadas.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Adrianna. Adrianna is a Brazilian-American attorney, born and raised in Sao Paulo. She began her legal career as a corporate associate on Simpson, Thacker, and Bartlett's Latin American capital market team. Adrianna has drawn on her love of contracts as an entrepreneur in the fields of contemporary culture, real estate, and cannabis, as well as in her role as senior advisor to the senior deputy chairman at the National Endowment for the Arts under President Obama. Adrianna is the author of the book Favelization, the Imaginary Brazil in Contemporary Film, Fashion, and Design, originally published by the Cooper Hewitt Museum, Smithsonian Institution, and the series Rebranding Pot, She's passionate about Jewish psychedelic culture, leads the interfaith working group Faith and Delics. Hope I said that right. And you are both part of the Plant Medicine Law Group, a mission to expand equitable and legal access to plant medicine and help companies in the psychedelic and cannabis industries succeed in a complex emerging market. Awesome, providing strategic expertise to successfully launch, fund, and grow businesses. Yeah, welcome both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
us.
And we'll give a big shout out to our third partner. We are an immigrant woman founded law firm. Our third partner is Serena Wu. She is a Chinese American, both New York and California certified lawyer who cut her teeth at one of the top 5 law firms in New York and is now holding up the fort with us.
Well,
Awesome.
And it's so funny. I just realized as you were reading Adrianna's bio, it's like, you know, every time we do a podcast or prepare for an interview or a panel or any sort of like presentation type thing, we hear our own bios and we hear each other's bios. And I'm like more impressed with my partner's bios every time. It's like almost like every time I realize like the gravity of something new, that something else that they did. And I'm just like, wow, cool.
You two ladies are
The
inspiring.
feeling is
I'm blown
mutual.
away.
I know. And I have to put a little personal note in because she was one of my brides that I photographed. Yes. I don't even know how many years back now. We don't know. Do you want to even say? Do you know? You must know.
So I do know because I just celebrated my 10-year wedding anniversary, and our relationship with you is actually pretty deep. I mean, there were so many events. You did our engagement photo shoot in the meatpacking.
Yeah, I remember that.
Hilarious. All those buildings are like no longer there.
I know, they're all gone.
Hogs and heifers and all that stuff.
Know.
And then you did our like rehearsal lunch before the wedding, and then you did our very rowdy, very unorthodox wedding.
Brazilian themed wedding. It was amazing.
In Long Island City 10 years ago. So, yep, we have known each other for a very long time. And then you did my headshots right before we launched the law firm.
That's right. And that's how we reconnected. So, you know, talk about synchronicity and fate. And when I was doing your headshots, Jen, I was just listening to what you were doing and what you're planning. I was just so amazed and so impressed. I've always known you kick ass anyway. And so I'm just so pleased to have you all here today and to join us on this podcast. Spiritual shadowboxing really is, you know, we always talk about, because, you know, Freshta does the shadow work and I'm a boxer, and we love the idea of moving that energy through our bodies, you know, that it's a way to kind of emote energy, emote emotions. And as we go deeper and deeper into each conversations, I love what people bring to the table, because this is really about changing ourselves inward as doing the shadow work, and outward. So inner landscape and outer landscape. So that's what our mission is really to bring together people that are like-minded in spirit. So I'm going to get to the very first question that we have for you guys. And I can throw this out to whoever wants to answer first, but we'd love to hear from both of you on this question. Why are you so passionate about plant medicine or plant medicine law? Who's going first? A, you want to go first? I'm going to call you A.
I'll start.
Okay.
So I was actually thinking about this last night as I was wallpapering my kitchen, which was it was like both the most frustrating and the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And I was feeling kind of like the whole day I'd been pretty distracted and not that focused and not feeling particularly motivated to work. And I was thinking about how when you do something day in and day out, it becomes a job. And it's really easy for me personally to lose connection with the real deep why. You know, like every day I sort of have I'm a pretty intrinsically motivated person, and I also feel motivated by accountability to other people that I have, agreements with. However, that soul connection, it burns really, really bright at first with a given cause. And then over time, like it can really fade if I don't nurture it.
Yes.
And lately I've been feeling like, I'm spread thin doing a lot of wonderful things. And sometimes that why plant medicine can fall away. And it's something that I really need to remember to stay connected to. And what came to me yesterday as I was thinking about this is, yes, it's about plant medicine and all of the specifically spiritual, therapeutic, sociological, justice related benefits we get from its elevation and expansion and liberalization, really. But it's also, for me, I think the deeper thing is I'm passionate about this idea of a multiverse, that we're living in a multiverse. There are so many different realities happening, so many different frequencies we can tap into, so many ways to access ourselves and others and the divine. And it's just, whether it's energy work or curing breast cancer through a diet that you're on, or shrinking tumors with cannabis, or healing PTSD with psilocybin. It's like, these are all sort of, I see them as like spokes on a wheel, and the hub is energy and energy medicine, and like just being able to access and think about consciousness. And I'm so happy that I get to be alive and in my like very active creative years at a time where there are enough people this focused on evolving human consciousness to the point where I get to make it my full-time job and even get a little bored of it sometimes. What a blessing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love some of the points you talked about, the multiverse and, timelines and frequency, because, as a seer, I consider myself a seer as a photographer, and through my guided visual meditations and my writing, the idea that, we're energetic beings and that we have the sovereignty and a right to heal and a right to choose the way we want to heal. And what I love about what you guys are trying to do is like elevating that in a position where now, like mainstream and the legal world is seeing that we are standing up for our rights to heal. We're standing up for our right to choose how we want to move through this world. So thank you. Thank you so much. I'm passionate about photography. I get bored too sometimes. So, but thank you. That was beautiful. I loved it.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that I'll throw in is that, just like Hadas was saying, that it's interesting how we hear each other's bios and we kind of gain new appreciation for those little data points that we kind of know by heart. To me, it's always interesting to hear my partners speak on podcasts and on interviews, because in a normal meeting, right, about business, I don't get to hear this level of reflection from Hadas, which is so interesting and gives me a whole new appreciation for how she thinks, and also how complementary her way of thinking and speaking is to mine. I'm a lot more of a pragmatic, also skeptical, not comfortable with woo-woo vocabulary. And so I feel like we're a great balance to each other, because I'm passionate about
what's a lot of woo-woo people here, though.
A lot of woo-woo people. And I tend to be around them. And then they look at me and they're like, what's wrong with you that you don't talk like us? And I'm like, there's a reason why I don't talk like you. And then that's because I'm like worried about getting to the point and worried about getting my to-do list through. But all joking aside, I think that my passion for this topic is very much a result of my interest and my own struggles with mental health and mental health treatments, and the limits of mental health treatments, and also the limit of the diagnosis language that exists through the prism of the DSM-5. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one way that I approach this topic, which is, if there are better ways of taking care of people in these really complex mental health diagnosis situations, we should pursue them, especially when we see that these solutions are growing out of the ground, and have been used by other cultures through millennia, or even sometimes our own cultures, but then that link got broken. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing that I'm very passionate about. And then the second thing is a combination of faith and mysticism and like a reawakening and a reconnection to the mystical traditions that exist in every tradition, in every religion that we may have been born to. And again, many links were broken for many reasons in those traditions, but that vocabulary exists. And I just see kind of that being a wonderful way in which people can explore the mystical aspect of plant medicine with a little bit more structure, a little bit more history, a little bit more historiography to their mystical thought than some of the trends of like supermarket spirituality that I see out there, and that makes me worry about, you know, what happens when people are very susceptible in certain states, and the charlatanism that can kind of enter people's lives in those states.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I, as someone who works with people who do have trauma and have work to do to heal, I find it limiting if they don't have access to this stuff. You know, I mean, we can do deep work together, and there's a little bit of like hands tied, because as a coach, we're not diagnosing. We're not able to do the same thing that, let's say, the bar and the association allows for with medical diagnosis. And I feel like it's such a healing journey that can be had for people, that they get to choose, hey, I don't want Prozac or an antidepressant. I actually really want to get to the root of this thing versus putting a Band-Aid on something. And to that point, I'm curious about your own healing journeys. Adrianna, you mentioned a little bit like your own journey with mental health, but what brought you both to creating a platform of reform and education around plant medicine?
Well, so this is a piece that I've just I remembered learning this in law school, and it recently like resurfaced for me. The tort, which is I guess, so intentional infliction of emotional distress is a tort, which it basically means it's a wrongful act or an infringement on someone's rights that can lead to civil as opposed to criminal liability. An intentional infliction of emotional distress is a tort, and it did not exist. It wasn't a legally actionable concept until I think, I want to say midway through the 20th century. It might be a little bit early or a little somewhere around there, but regardless of when it came into being under the law, at one point or another in American legal history, it did not exist. And when you look into the history of why it didn't exist, it was because, among other things, it just wasn't considered a harm, hurting someone emotionally. And there was no way to measure those kinds of damages. How do you quantify that into dollars? So, if you don't understand it, you can't make it illegal to do it. And I mention that because I think that one of the reasons I'm excited about the work we're doing and the work that so many other people are doing in this space is feel like part of what we do is we're giving a vocabulary and sort of a legal cognizance to these concepts that were previously not recognized in the main, superstructures of our society, in the law, in medicine. These concepts, human consciousness, energy, has existed since the beginning of time by definition. Maybe not human consciousness, but consciousness and energy, that's old. That's old stuff. And we're still learning how to talk about it, although we've all always known that we feel it. And so I see us as a bridge between the feelers and the doers, and like the talkers and the rule makers and the categorizers. And I think that, that in and of itself is really healing for me, because as an immigrant and as someone that, just grew up feeling like I'm part of a lot of different worlds, but not fully in any of them, having the ability to utilize that, very lowercase t trauma, but trauma nonetheless, in furtherance of some good in the world, feels like it wasn't all for naught, and feels like there's a rhyme and reason to why we go through things in life. And to me, knowing that following my heart and following my own healing path has led to something this great in my life, and has led me to, being able to build a business and work with these two amazing women, it feels validating. And it feels like, yes, you were right not to go down paths that didn't feel authentic. And you were right to reject things that didn't feel like that, were inspiring. And for a long time, I was like, I was haunted by the choices I made. I felt like, should I have just gone down a really conventional path? Should I have even gone to law school? So I think, this firm is in and of itself like very healing for me.
And I think in terms of my personal life, I feel like I've always been very comfortable with taboo topics, ambiguity, and chaos. So if I sit back and look at the different phases of my career, whether it's the Brazilian capital market reality as a corporate lawyer, or whether it was then the art world, but specifically dealing with Latin American art and design as that was starting to be recognized by academia, and then cannabis, and then now kind of like the larger field of plant medicine, I feel like I've always sniffed out and then felt most comfortable where other people just could have been overwhelmed by the ambiguity. And I think that does tie back to being bilingual, binational, bicultural. They say that children that grow up bilingual have an ability to better assimilate paradoxes. So something can be one way and be the other way. So I think that in my life, I am, firmly a consumer of traditional mental health and psychiatric and psychological help and medications, and yet am also able to work towards a future that includes these other things, and at many times have to cross over them, but then also know when not to cross. Because one of the big reasons I personally want to see legalization is not just because of harm reduction, which is like a big term that gets thrown around. It literally is for better triage. So people who are on Prozac and want to be on Prozac for certain reasons, but then let's say want to have a deeper guided experience in a safe setting, you've got to have someone there in the middle that is probably trained as a pharmacist to say, this is how we're going to deal with these daily meds that keep you safe and keep you healthy. Mm-hmm. This is how we're going to deal with them before this really kind of overcharged deep experience. And then this is what we're going to do after that experience to evaluate whether you go back on them, when you don't. So I think that I'm not here to throw out any bathwater with any baby. What I'm saying is these two worlds need to come together more.
I agree.
So that people can access, because I am not going to say that meds are not necessary. Yeah. And I'm also not going to say that they're solving the problem. But exactly. We need this legalized future is one in which, the healing is actually multidimensional, because legal and, currently underground expertise can come together for the benefit of a single, individual or a community or a group.
I love that you said that. And I love another thing that you said about supermarket spiritualism. I like that term, because I know exactly what you're talking about. And the thing is, there's a lot of people have been ready just to get rid of their daily meds, because I think they feel like they've been on them so long. They feel like their health is only, and their healing has only gone to a certain point, because it doesn't really go to the root of a lot of the problems, of the psychological, the trauma, the shadows, the difficulties that they faced. And by having maybe an ayahuasca experience or microdosing with mushrooms, they can actually go in deeper into some of those wounds and some of those experiences that are causing the trauma in a safe place. where they can do it. So like, you know, some people are like, I'm going to just get rid of my drugs. I'm going to try the microdose mushrooms because my friend or the shaman or this person said this. And it's really terrifying in some ways. And that these people can have really bad adverse effects. And I think it's always been the combination of Eastern and Western medicine and philosophy. It's the hybrid of the two is where we're going to reclaim the sovereignty of our healers and our healing. And one of the questions too was like, I love the fact that, you know, people that have been in the healing modalities, that have been using these, can now have a place to feel safe. That, you know what I mean? That they can feel like they're elevated as healers. You know, they might not have the degrees. They might not be a psychiatrist that can do the scripts for the medicine, but they have something that they can give, and they have a place that they can be protected to as well. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that and
two things that you're saying get me excited about to mention. One is that everyone should check out the work of Dr. Julie Holland. I personally want to read a lot more of her writing. She is someone that Hadas recently had the chance to interview for an article that she'll be publishing through Lucid News. But she's someone who really, I think, on the medical side, straddles these two worlds and wants to straddle these two worlds and wants to really kind of further this conversation about how to do things safely, how to experiment, so I think anyone who's curious about where these intersections are taking place should check out her work. And to your second point about
her name, Julie.
Dr. Julie Holland, Holland. And then to your second point about, you know, healers being elevated, one of the things that's most fascinating to me is to see the FDA approved trials that are taking place at places like Johns Hopkins and Imperial College and NYU and other universities that we would all kind of know the name, that they tap into the knowledge of legacy underground healers and guides when designing their protocols. So we obviously need to make sure that as biotech companies that are going to be for profit, and many of which are already traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange, we need to make sure that whatever knowledge made this kind of legal reality possible remains a part of the picture. But we also need to, you know, give credit to those individuals who are helping shape the processes and protocols. And I'm not going to call them ceremonies because they're not called ceremonies in a scientific setting, but you know, these underground and legacy individuals that are a part of the process that leads towards legalization.
Right. And I think another legacy is another great word that I love that you're using to describe people that might be in a lineage of healers, you know.
Hadas taught me.
Oh, you did?
I love it.
I'm writing all these words that I like.
I'm also hearing something that feels so warming to my heart, which is this inclusivity, right? It's neither the medical and the therapists and the prescriptions or all shamans and legacy holders. There's this element of including everyone at the table, right? It feels very holistic to me to say, hey, let's bring everyone's gifts to the table for the furthering and bettering of humanity.
Yeah, I think one of the things that this psychedelic space, when it's at its best, does is there's a recognition that no one person knows what's going to work for all of us. And no one group should be deciding that, including the government. You know, I don't think that the ultimate authority on on how to use psilocybin should be the Oregon health, whatever their health agency is at the state level, even if they do create a psilocybin specific commission to decide it. And, you know, nothing against Oregon, just an example, but like there is a liberty argument to all of this, which is like, if you want to sit in a ceremony and eat peyote, fine. As long as you're not over harvesting it, cool. If you want to go to Mardi Gras and eat acid, fine. As long as you're not hurting anyone and you know that it's actually acid because you were allowed to test it in the drug testing kit, fine. You know, we should be allowed to do these things. And no one except for ourselves as adults who can consent and make these types of decisions really have any place dictating the kind of relationship we have with nature ultimately.
Well, it is like it is taking back our sovereignty. It's taking back our power. And you know, I think that you know, mainstream medicine, I think, takes away a person's ability to trust their intuition, right? So, you know, I have a chronic illness, blah, 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 blah. So I'm very familiar with my Western doctors and how they want to heal me and the medicines they want me to stay on for the rest of my life. And then I've had to experience with many functional medicine doctors. And you know, for acute care, you're never going to not go into a Western medicine. But what I love about functional medicine doctors is that they allow you to develop that intuition, to trust that will be good for me. So like you said, if taking acid is going to be good for my healing, then but we as a sovereign beings have the right to decide that for each other and for ourselves. So that's why I think this bridge, as Adrianna said, is so important, that you guys are the bridge. And I think you're doing such amazing, important work right now, you know. We've saw in just regular Western medicine, I've seen, you know, dealing with my illness for so long, I've seen it, the bridge of, you know, the homeopathic or holistic doctors coming in and being, you know, part of your team. So I see it with the plant medicine too, being an extension of that.
And I always like complicating topics a little bit more. So, you know, one of the things that I think we all have to do is A, recognize that we're in the United States, B, recognize that it is a capitalist structure, C, recognize that the best intentions kind of get incorporated into political and economic processes in skewed ways. And one of the things that two things fascinate me about that could influence how plant medicine ends up kind of shaking out. And one of them is the history of the FDA, but what gets excluded from FDA control. Yeah. So what I find fascinating is the way that the supplement industry sits and has lobbied to sit outside of FDA control. So I'm almost like kind of playing devil's advocate with what Hadas said, which is right? Like being critical of and being kind of wary of too much government control, right? Which is a great concern and a great point. Mm-hmm. And then the flip side of that is when substances that are supposedly good for your health get lobbied into being outside of government control. And as we see a trend towards supermarket spirituality, we also see a trend towards supermarket kind of definitions of health and how to get there. Mm-hmm. And that's what worries me, right? Is when things kind of sit in a situation that benefits those companies, but doesn't have the type of oversight that you sometimes need to counter good marketing. So that's just like a concern that I have, which is if things fall into the realm of supplements, well, we need to be aware of what supplement history has been. And there's a fantastic podcast about that called The Secret. And the first part of it analyzed the history of multi-level marketing organizations and how those also have sat outside of legal supervision in this country and have mixed, you know, a lot of like faith language and cult behavior and self-empowerment language. And then the second season was about the supplement industry. So those are things that I kind of keep in mind so that I'm optimistic, but also kind of cautious about where we're going.
Yeah, and I so hear like a balancing act in all of this, right? It's like anything that we want to lift up, raise as another opportunity for healing in our world has to be tempered, might be the word, with some practicality, with some absolute aspiration, and then sort of be like, where's the sweet spot where this is given with care and people are cared for through plant medicine? Like that sounds to me like the goal. And I'm wondering too, you know, one of our questions was, about this being a new world of therapy for trauma and the microdosing. So just curious your thoughts on how this could support, the current cycles of trauma people are facing as another option for their healing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I couldn't have said it better myself with respect to this medicine being delivered with care. I think that's it. If I had to boil it down to one sentence, that's it. So thank you. And with respect to microdosing and trauma, I think, I'm not a scientist, not a doctor. I know that I've found microdosing, without going into too much detail, generally very helpful. I think that one of the reasons it seems to be appealing is because it almost, a microdose by definition is a sub-perceptual amount of anything. And I think that because you don't have psychoactive, effects with microdoses, you're able to sort of go about business as usual. And I think that that's, if that works for people, and anecdotally, it seems that it very much is, that's fabulous. And I think it takes what it takes to get you to the place you need to be and you want to be. And if it's microdosing, great. If it's macrodosing, great. I feel very unattached to methods. I think, personally, I feel like I do what works for me, and I leave the meta stuff to the scientists and the actual shamans. Yeah.
And I'll add to that I think that I'm happy that organizations like MAPS chose PTSD as its early focus for its early trials. It is a bipartisan, very unifying issue. And what's interesting about PTSD is I recently finished reading The Body Keeps the Score, and there we learned how early that diagnosis, how recently that diagnosis was added to the DSM-5, and how misunderstood PTSD was, and still is, right? Because it still is a kind of now diagnosis, but a lot of times the trauma was very removed in time, and so we're still kind of treating the perception of the trauma rather than the root. But still, what matters is that PTSD was recently added, and it's great that that treatment-resistant depression and PTSD are such early kind of choices and bipartisan choices that are being pushed through the FDA. There are already for-profit biotech companies pushing studies on microdosing. I think that will take a little bit more time for us to kind of get the large scientific studies published, but that reality is existing alongside anecdotal, right, accounts that we're hearing. And the trend of microdosing, especially among people in Silicon Valley, has pushed the conversation into the mainstream in a great way. So have books like Ayelet Waldman's great book, A Very Good Day, in which she kind of was inspired by the book by Fadiman, whom I'm forgetting the first name. I think it's James Fadiman. Yep. That is a book about microdosing. And then she had that experience with her depression and then wrote her own book, which apparently is now being produced into a Netflix special. So, we're seeing, what I'm trying to say is there's science, but then there's also contemporary culture. There's, positive and negative. There's liberalization, and then there's concern. And these are always multiple tracks that are taking place at the same time. So when I say I like chaos, that's the dimension of chaos that we live in. So we're at an interesting time where, yes, it's a psychedelic renaissance, but we're already seeing, the capital markets opening up, when we're already seeing people advocate for indigenous reciprocity so that some money and some of the profits that are being generated get directed towards the communities from which a lot of the knowledge comes from. You already see, conferences that are kind of targeting different areas of the psychedelic space with very different ethos and very different perspectives. We don't know how this is all going to shape out, but it's an exciting time to be in that intersection.
If at some point before we end it in the chat, if you could write some of those books down for us, I'd love to share that to our audience. But thank you for that. Thank you. And I think one of the questions I would love to ask you guys is if you could, talk about a little bit of any of your own personal healing journeys that maybe have led you to wanting to create a platform for reform and for education of law for plant medicine.
I mean, I don't know if this answers your question exactly, but what came to mind is that my early formative experiences with plant medicine, I think the best and most significant piece that I walked away with was how to make a very clear and direct and specific prayer for my life. And then how to live that prayer every single day, how to walk on the path that I laid out using the access to my deepest intentions that I think that medicine was sort of facilitating for me in ceremony.
I understand.
And
that's a powerful manifestation. I mean, that's
exactly. And I think that ultimately, and it was a long, I think one of the reasons it's hard for me to think about my healing journey in a way that is an answer to a question is that I still feel like I'm on it. I definitely know where point A is, but I'm not at point B yet. I'm in the middle, and I think I will be forever.
I think everybody that's the journey, right?
Yeah. But I think that through understanding the depth and power of what it is to make a prayer for my life and then walk that and live it, over the years, I got really in touch with my ability to co-create my reality with what I theorize and experience as divine.
Right.
And I think that everything in my life is, a result of that co-creation.
And that's beautifully said. I love that, because we always talk about being a co-creator of our reality, but what does that really mean? I mean, that's very woo-woo, you're co-creator. I say that quite a bit, but it really is so simple about just having that intention and manifesting that. Everybody's the secret manifestation. I want to manifest this. But the thing is, with manifestation, it's as simple as a prayer or an intention that you keep. And then the manifestation comes to you. You know what I mean? It's very subtle energy shift. But to have and to do an intention before a ceremony is so powerful. And then to continue that after the ceremony just kind of just allows that life path, that timeline to just manifest in front of you. So you co-create.
Yeah. And I think about it so my dad, when he taught me to ride a bike, I grew up in Marin County and it's very hilly. And so I learned to bike mountain biking. And you can fly off of a cliff mountain biking. And my dad just told me, don't look at where you don't want to go. If you look at the thing you're afraid to crash into, you'll crash into it. So look where you want to go, and that's where you'll go. And it's the same thing. It's it's truly just the same thing.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A couple of things come to mind. One is that I've taken it upon myself to share what is happening in the world of cannabis and plant medicine with my mainstream.
Ooh, hello? Is everybody else on?
Yeah, I think she froze for a sec.
Yeah, she did.
Muted. Her internet's been funny for the past couple of days.
Yeah. Is she still upstate? That's why?
Yeah, she's in the Catskills.
Okay. So hopefully she'll be coming back soon. And yes.
Trained doctors in the hope that
we totally lost her. Hopefully she can come back.
Well, I just want to say I resonate so much with the idea of our own personal responsibility in co-creating. I find it pretty grounding. I don't find it woo-woo, because I think intention, devotion, personal responsibility, accountability, I'm pretty straightforward that way into, there's the co-creation. It wasn't magic. It was deeply devotional to your own quality of life.
I love that.
I love that.
That's so beautiful.
Can you say that again?
Probably not, but it'll be on the recording. It's just part of I teach my clients habits, right? Just like there's no magic here. I mean, there is magic. I take that back. But it's also your divine steps towards the dream, right?
Yeah.
That make it happen. Like things aren't going to just come to your doorstep usually.
Yeah.
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 And I will say, until she comes back, I had a recent, and I'm with you, Hadas, on perpetually being on a healing journey. I think that's mysticism to me, is continually removing emotional debris that keeps my heart away from the divine. So having a grandfather who was a Sufi mystic, I relate to this place of like, the heart is the buried treasure and everything else is just stuff to let go of. But having had a recent experience, I was telling Kelly, I felt so vast. Like I said to my partner, he was chaperoning, like I feel bigger than our apartment. I feel bigger than this room. I feel bigger than out there. Like I don't know what's going on here, but I feel way bigger than what I think I am. And like really shimmery. And as heart-centered as I believe myself to be, it was a whole other level of heart opening.
Wow.
So I just wonder, because now I've carried that with me a few weeks, and you don't forget that. It's like when stuff goes down, there's the human animal in me that I take care of. And then there's like, but I remember being this really vast being. So I'm just wondering if that resonates with you about just being able to see beyond our kind of primal human animal stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what's so interesting about it in relation to co-creation and intention setting and prayer is that for me, when we describe the just experience of feeling huge and bigger than our apartment and just endless, that could either be terrifying or wonderful depending on like the backdrop and I guess depending on the experience you've primed yourself to have. And I think that you clearly have you tend to your spirit beautifully, and so when that force comes in, the backdrop is magnificent and shimmering. And I think you're clearly an inherent I think everyone has inherent beauty. I think you just talking to you for 45 minutes, you can tell like you've scraped away a lot of the stuff covering the magnificence, and it shows through really easily. And I think that that's something that's accessible to everyone. And the opposite is also accessible to everyone, just like letting the muck build up and build up and build up so that even your experiences of, mystical experiences, scary. That's like, there's no bad trips. Your trips are just showing you what's going on.
Ooh, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, definitely a lot of exfoliating through the years.
Oh yeah, she's helping me too. She's helping me. Thanks. Digging deep.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she's going to be able to come back. Maybe we can just have one quick final question. Oh, I think she is trying to connect to the audio right now.
There she is.
Oh, yay!
Woo!
We put in the new modem box, and this is what happened. So sorry about that.
You made it, though. You made it.
I made it back just to say goodbye.
I think Kelly had one last question, if that's okay with
I
you.
think, yeah, the last question we were going to ask is, and I think you kind of, all of you have touched upon it, but about how you're supporting entrepreneurs with with your firm, and maybe you can just touch upon that a little bit more. We only have maybe a few more minutes, and then we can, close it. So if you just want to, end with a few things.
I'll take a stab at paraphrasing what Hadas often says, which is that a lot of times lawyers and the legal profession are tasked with preserving the status quo and furthering the status quo.
Right.
And we're in a situation where, because we have these beliefs that we've shared and these hopes that we've shared with you guys, that we're actually trying to shape new realities and new possibilities so that this kind of service, this kind of healing, this kind of medicine can be incorporated into people's lives. So Hadas posits the question in an article that she wrote, what is the psychedelic space? And she starts exploring these notions of what is psychedelic lawyering, which she's now exploring with other psychedelic lawyers in the Psychedelic Bar Association, to say, not only do we want to be lawyers for the psychedelic industry, but how can we fold into our values as lawyers some of the teachings of these experiences. So that's an interesting challenge as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Perfect. Any last comments? Hadas?
Yes, I feel like I just had an energy work session. Talking. This is so wonderful. This was great.
I told Kelly, I told Hadas that you needed to photograph her wedding, but it's COVID. She's getting married in Florida. It would just be too much, but maybe we'll do a photo.
I don't know. When is your wedding?
It's April 12th.
We would just call for a wedding in Florida for May, a big wedding. So
let's see.
Well, we don't have a photographer for our rehearsal dinner yet, so if you're around, we should talk.
Well, where are you? You're very sunny and palm trees behind you.
So I'm currently I'm in Palm Beach County, at my sister-in-law's house.
Oh, very nice.
But usually we're in Miami Beach.
Oh, love Miami. Work there a lot. Love it. So
yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
To be continued on many different fronts. Thank you so much for giving us a platform to chat about all of these different topics that kind of circulate and interact with our reality as a law firm.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it, and thank you for sharing just such an inspiring vision for the future for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thanks, guys. Okay, Spiritual Shadowboxing, episode 14. It's done. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop the recording.